welcome back to the SBP Podcast Mobile Filmmaking. I'm Susie Botello. I'm your host, and you're listening to episode 133. His name is Ant Pruitt. This is the third time that he's been in our show, and I welcome him and I introduce him to you. Ant is someone that is a good friend of the International Mobile Film Festival in San Diego and also of this podcast and a personal friend of mine as well. I met Ant through a podcast because not only do I host this podcast, but I actually listen to podcasts as well. And as you know, I'm really attracted to innovative technology, all things online, and obviously the things that you do, the things that you accomplish with your smartphone cameras. This Week in Tech is the podcast network that I am actually referring to. It's called Twit. And Twit TV has Ant Pruitt on a show that's called Hands-On Photography. Why am I talking about photography? Well, that's actually Ant's specialty. But also, I thought I'd have him on the show to give you some basics about smartphone photography, which he is an advocate for. And I'm not talking about the iPhone. I'm talking about Android phones. He is a big fan of the Pixel smartphone, as a matter of fact. But what he's going to share with you is a lot of information, very simplified, because I basically told him, simplify this when it comes to some of the basic photography terminology and concepts that once you get them, you'll never forget them, regardless of the camera that you use. We also have had, in the last film festival in San Diego, Ant Pruitt as a judge for the short mobile film competition. And so we asked him to return, and he has accepted that mission. But also, this year, for the very first time, the film festival has put on a special competition. It's called Frame a Story Photo Contest, one story in one frame, shot with a smartphone camera. It's a photo contest, and Ant has agreed to also be a judge in that contest. And so I wanted to thank you for listening to this. I wanted to thank Ant, and I wanted to also thank our mutual friend, Scott Bourne, who is also going to be a judge in this competition. I'm actually making that announcement right now, and I think that you're going to get a lot out of this. One of the things, let me just give you a very quick rundown. Basically, and by the way, the regular deadline for the photo contest is November 21st. So all of that is around the corner. Now, the things that we're going to be referring to are, there's a myth about smartphone photography. We're going to go into that. We're going to talk about printing smartphone photos to canvas, and of course, some photography basics, pixels versus resolution, and storytelling with photographs. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, guys. We're also going to dive deep down underneath the iceberg, and we're going to get to a lot of juicy information for you regarding also the new iPhone 14 and the 40. Well, you know what? I won't go any further. I'll let Ant, because he's the one who brought that up, I'll let him share that with you. So if you guys are ready, are you ready? Let's go and talk to Ant. Hey everyone, I am here with the god of photography, Mr. Hands-On Photography, Ant Pruitt. Ant, How are you?
I don't know about God of photography, but I'm unbelievable as always. How you be?
You're definitely unbelievable and remarkable. Oh, it's so good to have you on the show again. Guess what I realized just about 15 minutes ago? So I thought this was the second time that you were on our show. This is number 3.
Yeah, this is 3rd.
Yeah, it's like ding, 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 ding. It's so awesome. It's like, I did not know that. This is the 3rd time. This is a big deal.
Well, I'm not a squeaky wheel. I'm easy to forget. I know this.
No, it's just like, it just seemed, so the first time was episode, well, I don't have it written down because I don't write everything. Wait, no, maybe I do.
How dare
okay,
you.
here it is. 85. And then you were 119, see? And then once I got past 100, I kind of like forgot all the below 100 ones.
She's like, I'm done. I've moved on.
It's like I've moved on to the hundreds now. I'm like, good. And then the next one was 119. And obviously I have a thing for the 19. Which is a great segue for me to remind everybody that the feature film competition's regular deadline is October 19th, which is in a few days.
Wow, look how that worked out.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? How, numbers just kind of connect to words. The reason that I invited you on the show, well, there are several reasons. One is because I think everyone that's listening is going to learn so much about photography, and you're a pretty cool advocate for smartphone photography. And I want you to touch with everybody, just touch on why that is. But the other reason is because you are one of the greatest judges for our photo contest that is brand new this year, the smartphone photo contest, which is, it's a story contest. It's called the Frame a Story Photo Contest. One story in one frame, shot with any brand smartphone. And I think a lot of listeners are going to love the fact that you are an Android smartphone person because they hear so much about iPhone. And I'm an iPhone person, but obviously I'm also, it doesn't matter to me.
Right.
So go ahead and share with everybody what brings you into the smartphone photography world.
Well, first, let me say thank you for all of the great build-up. Good gosh, I have a lot to live up to now with these next couple of minutes. And I hope I can. But as far as smartphone photography, back when you and I spoke on episode 85, I believe I told you that the smartphone camera is what really refired my sort of dead photography juices at the time. The Droid X was the phone and the camera, and I saw that this little tiny sensor had pretty decent capability, to be something that was fairly accessible to anyone. And I just continued to shoot and, practice and try to get better at the craft. And, over the years, I think I have, and I still got a ways to go and still can work at it. But it's just the fact that this is something that almost everybody has in their pocket or on their desk or on their couch cushion somewhere.
Right.
They have the opportunity to snap photographs that are beyond a standard snapshot because of all of the computational photography that's built into these devices. Is literally just tap the screen and it's done. Now, granted, it could be even better with some training and understanding, some of the concepts of photography, but everybody has a pretty good head start these days versus, a decade ago when their phones wasn't as smart. And cameras was the way to go as far as getting, quote unquote, good photographs.
Because the phones were dumb.
Yeah. I mean, there was a few smartphones out there, like I mentioned, that Droid X.
Yeah.
But even still, that was few and far between because everybody wasn't buying that phone just yet.
How many pixels did that one have?
I think it was pretty high. I think it was
4.
And
no, I'm just kidding.
Sounds funny saying this. I think it was pretty high at 18 megapixels.
Nice.
I think.
No, that's pretty good.
Well, you'd say that, but most of the regular people would be like, 18? My new iPhone's got 48 or 45. Well,
because they started out, there were like 2 megapixels, remember? Yeah. They were like...
Yeah.
I was already thinking about...
You know what? Now I got to look because I can't remember. Droid X. Yeah, this is great for the pod. Start looking it up on there.
I hate doing that. I'm so sorry. Because I hate it when people do that to me. It's like, don't put me on the spot. And meanwhile, while I'm complaining, I'm like...
Oh, no, it was 8 megapixels.
Yeah,
8 megapixels.
See, I was thinking 4 or 6. I was kind of... But, yeah. But, the whole point of it is, things have to grow. They have to start somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, yeah, that's pretty cool, though. And I remember in that that you shouted it out. Did I say that right? Shouted it?
Yes, you did. You did. It's good. If you didn't, we don't care. We're good.
That's right. People out there are like, what? That it was a Droid X. And to me, it just sounds robotic. Sounds kind of cool. And then after that, though, you moved on. So did you ever use the Sony?
The Sony smartphones?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? I did not. I have played with some of them over the years, but no, I never bought a Sony smartphone because back then they wasn't very good. They just recently turned into decent devices from a user experience. Take the camera out of the picture.
Yeah.
No pun intended. Those phones were just hard to use, just a really clunky user interface. It was Android, but it was a bad flavor of Android over the years. But it's gotten a lot better now.
And what year was that, by the way?
When it was bad?
Yeah.
I would say prior to 2016 or so.
Because in 2014, I think it was, they had just come out with 4K for the video camera. They were the first. Yeah,
and again, take the camera out of the picture.
Yeah.
That phone was pretty hard to use.
See, and that's the thing.
The Xperia line, right?
That's the thing. It's also a phone.
Yeah.
Because if it was a separate camera, then why would you use a phone?
Right.
If
I
that's
remember
how I see
right, with a lot of the Sony experience in their Xperia line, the performance of the phone would deter you because you go to open up the camera app, and this is some of the experience that I remember personally. Yeah. You go to open up the camera app, and it waits. Okay, now the camera's open. Oh. All right, frame up your shot, hit the shutter, wait. See, capture.
That's how I feel about PCs and going through the windows. It's like, how many windows do we need to get through?
Right. And it was a bad experience. But again, they've come a long way. It was nice they had all of these beautiful camera features back then, but you could never get to them.
Yeah.
But that's why nobody really bought those phones.
It's kind of
they're not even number 3.
So one of the things that I always felt that Canon had really good lenses,
Oh yeah.
And that I always loved Canon, for that, because even their most professional lenses, when you put them into the prosumer, cameras, they were pretty good. They were like almost broadcast quality. And I thought it was so disheartening when they came out with that smartphone a while back. And it was like, yay! And everybody was like, oh, it's just got to be awesome. And they just fell down the hill right off the bat.
Wait a minute, Canon?
Yeah. Oh no. I'm sorry. Not Canon. That was Red.
Oh, Reds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm saying
phone,
that
the
is
helium
because
was bad.
I wanted Canon to make a phone because of their lenses,
Yeah.
and then Red came out with it. That's right.
Yeah, Red had all of the great sensors. They have the great image sensors.
Yeah.
And color science. And you would think that the smartphone camera was going to be just amazing. But again, it was a horrible experience. I know 2 people that had it.
Yeah.
And
it was
neither one of them.
super expensive at the time.
Yeah.
You know, and then they did that. And, you know, the reason I'm connecting it to Canon is because when that happened, I was like, I was obviously very wrong about Canon. Canon, don't do that. Don't make a phone. It's not your thing.
Right. You know what you are. And it's not phones.
Yeah, but I had been like practically begging Canon to make a phone because of their lenses. So when Red did that, I was like, oh God, I was so wrong.
Yeah, but the thing is, and a lot of people in the photography community tend to forget this. Canon can make all of these great cameras and great lenses, but 95% of the time, that sensor that's on those cameras are from Sony.
Interesting.
You know? Yeah, just Sony makes pretty much all of the image sensors in cameras these days. And that's all the way from smartphone to cine camera.
Yeah.
And that's their thing. They're good at it.
Well, yeah.
You know, but then it takes the rest of the development from the OEMs like Canon or Nikon, where they put their special sauce into the color science. And that's when the magic happens, you know.
So what are some things that our listeners who are not, you know, professional photographers, but are using smartphones outside of just pointing and shooting, without getting into details about settings and things like that, but what are some concepts that would be useful to them, like aperture, ISO, and things like that, that they should at least know about in a simple way so that when these things come up, they understand them?
Sure.
Without having to Google it.
Sure. Well, I'll give it to you in 2 aspects here. We'll give you the brand new, this is my first time grabbing a phone camera, and then level 2 is the I'm curious side. On the beginner side of things, pick it up, hit the shutter, and boom, you're done, right?
Right.
But you can always maximize that by understanding that light is key. Light is what's going to make or break the image when you're a beginner. People love to take photographs out and about at the bars, and they look like a hot mess every single time, because not one bar in the United States of America is well lit. Yep. It's always a dim room, a dim area, or what have you.
It's so depressing.
You know, but for what I wonder why.
They just want to enhance the mood, so you're drinking more.
Right, keep drinking more, you know. But if you were to take your phone and just sit down at your breakfast table or whatever and just snap a photograph of your partner or a photograph of a plant in your kitchen or something like that, most of the time you're going to have natural sunlight coming into that room, and it's going to be gorgeous light. Snap that picture, and it's going to look great because you got light. So that's the main thing from a beginner standpoint, is just understand light is going to make or break the image. Now, you figured out all of that. You're ready to move up into the I'm curious about serious photography stage. Then you can start to look at some of the apps and look at some of the manual controls inside of your iPhone or Android device, or even something like Lightroom Mobile that has a camera built into it. Filmic, and they have First Light, which has manual controls built into it. And you want to play around with those. And again, light is still going to be a main factor in here. But now when you have manual controls, you get to manipulate how that light is being handled by your camera. When you look at what's called shutter speed, think of an old school camera, and when they click the button on the camera, it makes a click, click sound.
Right.
That is a shutter, opening and closing. Okay. And the faster that click, click sound is, that's saying, okay, that's my shutter speed. When that shutter speed is a much slower click, open and close, that's telling the camera to let in way more light than it normally would let in. Okay. So now that's giving your image sensor more light to play with. And that's one way to manipulate it. You can say, I don't want that much light, and speed that shutter speed up, and it won't let in as much light. And then the next control is aperture. Everybody hears about f2.8 and f12 and f whatever numbers, you know. All of that is a measurement of
f-stops.
Right, f-stops. That is your aperture measurement. And what that's measuring is there's a hole on the back of your lens that is sitting right in front of your image sensor. And you can tell that hole to be wide open or closed down a little bit. When the hole is wide open on the aperture blades, it's letting in more light. When it's closed down, of course, it's letting in less light. And again, that's just another way of controlling light for capturing your image. And you can play with that stuff in a lot of different scenarios, particularly when you're dealing with f-stops. The higher the number is, the darker the image is going to be. The lower the number is, the brighter the image is going to be. But then there's also the physics side of it. It also messes with what's called a depth of field. When you look at something in front of you, and just with your eyes, not with the camera, when you hold something in front of your face and you just look at it, it's in focus. But everything behind it sort of falls off out of focus. That's the depth of field effect that you're getting.
Like the
in
distance.
The camera. Right. And so the camera is going to do the same thing. The wider that aperture hole is open, the more shallow that depth of field is going to be. Things are going to start to fall out of focus really quick the further it gets away from your lens. And when you close it down, it brings things more into focus, even though it's letting in less light. So it's going to be a darker image, but everything can be in focus the higher that f-stop number is.
So if you want to achieve that effect manually, basically give us an example of what you would do.
You can go as low as f4, sometimes even f5.6, and you can still have a background that's somewhat blurry. Now, when you go lower than f4 and say f2.8, or f2.0, which is what most phones are trying to do nowadays, then you'll really see a shallow depth of field. Now, talking about smartphones, they don't have an aperture that you can move, to open or close. It's all simulated in the algorithm of the camera, okay? Because it doesn't have any type of mechanics inside of a smartphone. That's why they're so thin.
Yeah.
So what your app is going to do is simulate what it would look like if you had a measurement of f2.8 coming through to the sensor, and that's all it's doing.
So it's faking it.
It's faking it, but it still does a decent job.
Now, let's talk. So did we cover ISO?
Oh, ISO. Excuse me. That's another piece in that puzzle. There's 3 pieces of the exposure triangle: shutter speed, aperture or f-stop number, and ISO. And ISO is basically how sensitive to light your camera sensor is going to be. Think about if you're in a dark room and all of a sudden you walk outside in this bright sunlight, your eyes feel it, right?
It's like walking out of the theater at 2 in the afternoon, yeah.
Right. And what's happening is, number one, your pupils, which is in turn your aperture on your eyes, is wide open because it's in a dark room, and it's trying to shut and cut down the light as you go outside in the bright area. But also what's happening at the same time is that sensation of, ouch, this is painful. You can relate that to ISO. When you have high ISO settings on your camera, you're basically telling yourself, I'm in a dark room and I need to make my sensor as sensitive as possible to whatever light that's floating around in this room.
Grab what you can, right?
Right. So I can take it all in. But if you keep that same high ISO setting in a bright room, your image is going to just turn out white.
Yeah, it's going to blow it up, as they say.
Yep.
Nice. Well, this is good. So there's the three. The I almost called it the Bermuda Triangle.
It's the exposure triangle. The exposure triangle.
This is awesome. All right.
And I went into a lot of detail of that on my show, Hands On Photography. When I started that show, I got a lot of heat from people because, they were like, oh, wow, Twit's doing a photography show. I can't wait. And they were wanting me to get into scrims and different lights and yada, 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 and all of the gear. And I refused because I wanted to have people understand what happens when you pick up a camera. So I think it was episode 2. I'm looking at it's either episode 2 or episode 3.
I remember I watched that.
Episode 2, yeah.
I was really impressed with it.
Thank you. I did an episode on the exposure triangle. I actually did 2 episodes because it's that much information that you can play around with. And it's really important, and it will go a long way as you develop your photography skills and you understand the exposure triangle.
Yeah, and you do it, we should throw a link on here, like right now, in the notes. Like, wait, don't stop. Let's listen to the rest. The link will be there. It's not going anywhere.
We got you.
Yeah. So here's the thing. One of the things that I want to respond to that because it's the same thing with when I do workshops and things like that. When it comes to the gear, those things are constantly there and they're constantly updated, and there's a billion gazillion brands and ways to get them. And then whenever you get a new camera, you got to redo all that, especially with smartphones.
Yep.
And so what I want to get into with people in workshops and things like that is the fundamentals. I totally mispronounced that. My Spain-ish came out.
No, it's totally fine.
The fundamentals.
Have you heard me speak? Really? Come on.
No, but you're fine. You have the Zen
Southern drawl
voice. Yes. No. Actually, I think that's actually pretty smooth. It's smooth talk. That is the concept, that is the understanding. That's when you're building a house, that's your foundation. If you don't have a good foundation, it doesn't matter how beautiful and how wonderful the beams and, everything else in the house is. It's all going to just crumble away and fall apart on you over time.
Yeah.
And so those are the most important things to get, which is why I wanted you to explain that to our listeners, because once you get these concepts, those never change.
Nope, never does, regardless of the camera you pick up.
That's right. And
you know shutter speed, aperture, and ISO.
Exactly. And then the second thing I say to people is learn how to frame things, because I think that is the one thing that I picked up on since I was little was the framing of the shots, and how that perspective changes everything just from the angles that you choose and things like that. So, I just think those things are really, really important, more so than, all the little details of the gear and things like that. But those 3 things that you just talked about, it's basically how you control light and shadow. And how that affects the outcome of your photo. And I'm sounding like a pro, but I'm really not, you guys. It's just because Ant explained it so well that I'm getting it. So the other thing is there's a little bit of a myth, right, about photography, smartphone photography versus, DSLR, right?
Yeah.
And I just have to, this is my thing. You're a professional if you take good photos, period. Now, you can dissect it till the end of time. That's not what makes you a professional. What makes you a professional in the end is how it turns out and how people perceive it. Because it's not like a movie. You know, a movie, right? It's over extended of time. You're telling a full-on story over time, and there's so much psychology and everything involved in that. And it's very manipulative. Yeah, it's all the director, she is manipulating your perception of that story through the film. But with a photo, there's two types, right? There's the perception of the person that's taking that photo. What's their story that brought them to shoot that photo, right?
Yeah.
And then there's on the flip side, the perception of the person that's actually looking at that photo and how they perceive it, what they're getting out of it.
Yep.
And
that's true.
Yeah. And so it's the same thing with the whole myth of, you know, what's professional, what's not professional. And when I was a teenager, I got paid to, I think it was like $5 for each sign that I made for one of my friends who was still in high school. And she was running for class president. And she said, I want to pay you because you're so good at doing little cartoons and things like that, right? Whatever.
Look at you, Miss Entrepreneur.
That was back then. Well, see, that's the thing. So she paid me for that. That was the first time I got paid for doing anything really like that. And I thought, I just made art and I got paid for it. And somebody says, now you're a professional. I'm like, it wasn't that good. And they said, it doesn't matter whether you're good or not. The fact that you got paid for it is what makes you a professional. And that stuck with me, you know?
I'm on that fence a little bit because anybody can get lucky and sell one thing. I think being a professional is that plus a body of work.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's so much to unpack there. There's also your integrity and how, you know, there's so much to being professional, but in the most basic terms, right?
Yeah.
Flat out one-liner. What makes someone a professional? When someone pays you.
Yep. First thing is, did you get paid?
Yep.
You know, that's the very first thing.
It's really weird, right? But yeah. So that myth, let's blow away that myth that if you shoot with a DSLR, you're a professional. As far as, well, maybe not like that. Let me take that back. Your photos, the photos you take are professional, right?
Yeah, I absolutely hate that myth.
Yeah, me too.
I've been in that scenario a handful of times where, I walk in to do this particular shoot for someone that hired me. You know, we talked, we I had a pitch and all of that stuff, and we agreed to the shoot. I get everything set up, and I walk in and I'm ready to snap the images, and they're like, "Well, what camera is that?" And I'm like, "Does it matter?"
Right.
You know.
Are you hiring me or the camera?
Right, and they have these misconceptions of what a camera is supposed to look like, you know, because for the longest time I was creating stuff on a Rebel, like a Canon Rebel T5, T5i, and heck, I still have that camera, and I will still shoot with that camera, you know, and that's a consumer, almost prosumer-ish camera. So it's, you know, from a spec standpoint, it's not something that people are wanting to write about, but put it in the right hands, you can really create some nice art, you know. And so there was a couple times when folks would be like, "Well, what camera is that?" And I'm like, "Look, dude, just let me show you what I'm going to do with it," you know. And I had another scenario. There was this comedian. I can't remember his name now, but there was a comedian, local comedian, that needed headshots done, and his agency reached out to me, and I was like, sure, I can shoot them. And I went to the studio. We were renting out the studio space and was just firing along, and I snapped some photos like I normally would. And then something told me, you know what, I'm going to use my phone now because I felt that confident in it. And at the time, it was the original Google Pixel. And for the longest time, his profile was that image from the Google Pixel.
Nice. See, so I used to, people paid me for shooting photos at events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did that too.
Yeah, and
stressful sometimes.
I
depending on the event.
I actually now outside of weddings, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those are the scariest thing. Like I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah,
it's a very emotional
weddings.
kind of situation.
Not doing weddings.
But for other events like corporate events, and community events and things like that, even at our film festival, I walk around and I take photos. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, the whole, you want to get the happy people. You want to get them in a way that they're lit up. You want to get over the shoulder shots. You want to get this. It's what people expect, and they go, "Oh, that's the kind of photo that you see like on a magazine from an event." And I shot it with my iPhone 6 or whatever it was, right? And people look at that and go, "Wow, that's a great photo," And I'm going, "Yeah, I shot that with my iPhone." But I could have shot it with a DSLR. You know what I'm saying? Because it would look the same. Now, if you're going to sit there and study it and do all these other things, that brings up the other point that I think we should talk about. Printing smartphone photos to canvas. Is that doable?
In a word?
Yes.
Yes.
That was total unison.
It absolutely is. As a matter of fact, I've done it several times. I sell prints of some of my images, not everything, but I have a service that I use. You go to antpruitt.com/prints, and you'll see roughly, I don't know, maybe 20 or so different images that you could choose from.
They are beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I rotate them in and out. And there's a couple images in there that are smartphone images. Nobody knows that. But there's a couple that are smartphone images. And this year, we are now October 2022. 3 of the prints that have been ordered this year were of a Google Pixel. Well, not of a Google Pixel, were shot by a Google Pixel.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm sure there's a couple more in there that have been printed. Actually, I know there is. There's at least one more that was shot with. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a Google Pixel too, because I haven't really had any other phones.
Yeah, that's your mojo.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty cool. So there you go, you guys. So
and these are prints, and I'm not talking postcards. I'm looking at one right now that was just ordered 3 days ago at the time of this recording. This is a 16 by 13. So 16 inches by 13 inches. So that's not tiny.
Wait, let me go there. Is this the one that you sent me earlier?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, 16 by 13.
When I said I want to go there, I didn't mean this kind of go there, but oh my God, I want to go there. This kind of reminds me a little bit when I used to live out in the mountains. There was a path like this with trees and everything right behind the house. And people used to go, "Why do you want to live all the way out there?" I'm like, look at this. It's like a forest in the, I called it my Hobbit land. But this is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's in Carolina, right down the street from where I used to live. And I used to walk that trail pretty regularly because I got to get my stupid cardio in. And that particular day, the sun, I got out there just at the right time for the sun to do its magic. And again, light is going to make or break your images.
Yeah, the shadows. I was going to point that out. The shadows. So it's basically since this is audio. Describe the image.
Well, the image is called Mystical Trail, and so what it is I'm going down a walking path essentially in the woods, and this is late fall because there's no leaves on the trees. The trees are just sort of bare. But as I'm walking down this path, I get some sunlight off to my right, and that sunlight is making the shadows fall across the trail, and it's basically casting shadows of the trees just sort of going across the lit path there. And it's a little bit of green, just a little bit of green grass around the edges of the trail, but that's about it. And the rest of it is just me taking liberty with the color grading, and I did a little bit of purple haze.
I was going to say magentas, purple haze.
Because I don't know if you've noticed this about any of my photography. I tend to present things in cool tones.
Because you're a cool guy.
Well, I don't know about all that. But whenever I see stuff, whenever I'm shooting something from my heart and art kind of thing,
yeah.
Before I click the shutter, most of the time my brain sees it in a cool tone, a blue hues or sometimes magenta and purple and things like that.
Well, that's
I don't know why that is, but it is, you know. And I hardly ever have warm, fuzzy images. They're normally sort of blue and moody and cool. And this is one of those instances. Other than the specks of green that's sort of going along the edges of the trail and the standard sunlight coming across it, that's it. The rest of it is just sort of blue and moody and purple.
It's so...
And people dig it. So I've sold several copies of this thing.
Wow.
Several.
And do they know?
They don't know. No idea.
And and it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Because when you're looking at something, it's kind of like what I was saying before about the perspective, right? The perspective of the person who's creating that shot, you, and then there's the perspective of the person that says, wow, I want that in my living room. You know, I want that to be the subject of conversation, which is, you know, and that's speaking of subject, it's the subjectivity of photography, which is why it's also art.
Right.
You know, that's really beautiful. Well, we're definitely going to share that as
Thank
well.
You.
We're going to have 50 links for everybody there. But I think we'll have the main link, and we'll single that one out as well for everybody. So we beat the myth of what a professional is, and then also the fact that yes, you can be a professional with a smartphone camera, and you can literally print to canvas. And if you can print to canvas, there's no reason why you can't put it on a website.
That's right.
Or a video, or whatever, you know. So that's basically it. It's kind of like what's happening with films as well. You know, with the feature films that are going to Amazon and Tubi and places like that. You know, why would you? You know, I mean, it's like they're really. I mean, you can get technical, depth of field, and all these things, but in the end, it's about the distribution, kind of, right? Because that's accessibility and the way you reach people, and people appreciate it. So,
you know, and again, I'm a pro. I have all of my different tools, and yes, I have my go-to tools. 9 times out of 10, if I'm shooting video, yeah, I'll admit I'm going to pick up my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K camera.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah, you have it.
Because I have it.
Yeah.
You know, but if I don't have it, I will not hesitate to pull my Pixel 6 Pro out of my pocket. You know, it doesn't even cross my mind like, oh, I don't have my camera, you know.
Well, and a lot of people don't have, you know, they have to pick and choose like what they're going to get. You know what I'm saying? And when it comes down to it, it's like, I I got to get a phone, and you upgrade your phone every year.
Yeah, everybody's doing it every year, every 2 years tops.
And the insurance on a phone is like, what, $10 a month compared to, how much do you pay insurance for, I mean, service insurance, not like a warranty.
Well, it's a little more than $10 a month. I'm not going to say exactly, but it's a little more than $10 a month.
Yeah.
And that's to cover the devices. That's also to cover, me as a business owner too.
And if you drop an SLR, a DSLR compared to a phone, it's harder to find.
Different ball of wax.
Yeah. It's completely, and just the process of getting that fixed, right?
Yeah, it is something. Heck, even a lens. Drop a lens.
Oh my God. That's the most expensive part is the lens.
Yeah. Drop a lens to just one too many times and you will weep.
I remember my SLR camera that I bought. It was like, I was so happy and so proud finally to get an SLR. I was like a teenager. I was a little teenager and I bought an SLR. And now I'm trying to remember the brand. Anyways, it was the lens that cost, I think the body cost me like $399 or something, but the lens cost me almost $700.
Yep.
And I was like, are you
That's still
serious?
the going rate.
Well, I'm actually surprised that that's still the going. And it wasn't like top-notch stuff, but it was brand. It was a good brand. I mean, I wasn't going to mess around with that. You'll get the Canon R6 right now, and that's not even her flagship. You get the Canon R6 body. It's going to cost you, I believe, about $2,500. Okay, that's just the body alone. If you want to get their just outstanding 70 to 200 lens to go with that, that's going to be another $1,500, $2,000 as well. Yeah. Just for the lens. It's like, with the economy the way it is, next week it'll be like the price of a car. No. But without having to pay for the gas. But that's a whole other story.
I stand corrected. That 70 to 200 is not $2,000. It's $2,500. So it's the same price as the body.
Wow. Do I get two cameras or do I just get the? What are you going to do? See, it's like why? Because what good is the body without the camera, right? But it's the thing about, you can get this lens. And that's the other thing about the smartphone versus the DSLR, because you have to switch the lenses constantly, depending on, most people, they have a bag full of different lenses. You know what I'm saying? And so that's, for me, with my fingers, that's more opportunity for accident.
To drop something. That is a convenience factor of the smartphone. And again, it's getting better because of the computational side that's in it. Now I'd like to touch on something with your listeners regarding marketing speak.
Oh, yes. Go for it.
Particularly here in the U.S. of A., I can't say about the rest of the world, the phrase bigger and better seems to just win out in all scenarios for whatever reason. If you get a car that's got a 4-cylinder engine versus a V8, people are going to automatically jump to the V8 because, hey, it's more horsepower. But they don't think about the fact that you got to put way more gasoline in it, and it's just going to be a pain in the butt on your wallet.
The big tires,
so bigger isn't always better. And when it comes to photography.
And in Japan, it's the opposite.
Really?
Well, because in Japan, right, the smaller, they value the minimal things.
Wait a minute. I remember you telling me that before. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole minimalist stuff. Yes. I remember that. But when it comes to cameras though, it's not always the best idea to think about 40 megapixels is better than 20 megapixels, because that's not always the case, especially when looking at smartphones. Smartphones have image sensors in them just like any other camera, but the image sensor is usually less than half an inch in size. A standard camera, and I'm not even talking the expensive Canon full frame. We can say an inexpensive Canon APS-C, also known as a crop sensor. Those things are, roughly, 25 inches or so, something like that. So that's like 25 times, well, even more than 25 times bigger than a smartphone sensor. And those camera bodies are measuring their megapixels the same, just as you would on a phone. But a 20 megapixel sensor on a camera body is not going to look the same as a 20 megapixel phone sensor because of what's called the pixel size. They have pixels on all of these. That's basically photo sites that are capturing light. The size of those pixels make a big difference. And smartphones today are using some magic, if you will, because they know, look, I only have half an inch to work with, but I need to try to figure out a way to capture as much light as possible. So how can we manipulate this? And what they do is called pixel binning, basically combining the pixels together to make a super pixel, if you will. But even with that super pixel, it's still smaller than a pixel that you'll see on a regular camera body. They measure it in microns. Smartphone pixels are usually like 0.8 microns, tiny. On a camera body, they're usually like 2 microns starting out. So it's much bigger, much more light can be captured, much more light can be processed and help make your images look better. And so with Apple and Google and Samsung, they're touting all of this magical 40-something megapixel cameras. It's a bunch of bunk.
Well, because the marketability, what happens is there's the battle of the cameras in competition. Right. And so we are feeding that fodder by buying everything that they're telling us is, hey, well, look, it's got more whipped cream on here. You know what I'm saying? And we're like, yo, more whipped cream. That's awesome. Where's the ice cream, though, right?
Great analogy. Oh, man. Because that's exactly what it is.
And whipped cream is really just a bunch of air, with a little bit of,
empty calories.
Yeah. So
empty calories. It's great what the likes of Apple, Samsung, and Google are doing to an extent. But I hate the marketing speak because it's not necessarily helping people understand why when they take that photograph and it doesn't look as good as the camera next to them, it's because of physics. It's just not the same. Can you still take great images with a smartphone? Hells, yes. Mm-hmm. I know firsthand.
Right?
You could still do it. But just don't fall into the whole marketing speak. Understand that you're dealing with a sensor that is less than half an inch in size, and you're trying to capture light. And when you have such a tiny surface area to work with, you're going to have some limitations. Does that mean you are just straight out of luck because you have half an inch sensor? No, it doesn't. It just means you have to understand how to work within your limitations,
Yeah, so I used to do sales. I used to fall into sales a lot, and I would turn it into storytelling because everybody around me was selling by selling features. And see the curve over here and these knobs, and when it came to high-tech stuff, like televisions and things like that. I mean, that's what they were really selling, is just like all these features. And I'm like, people don't need that. It's like, what's your story? What are you going to use it for? What do you need it for? You know what I mean? And this is how, connecting the person that's buying something to the product that they're going to get.
Yeah.
As opposed to, the whipped cream thing. That really is actually kind of a good analogy.
I love that analogy. Yeah. That's so good. But I got ripped about this iPhone When it was announced, and again, I'm not an Apple hater by no means. I've always enjoyed Apple hardware. I just never been a fan of iOS, and that's why I still have the Pixel line, because it's clean Android and it just works for me. But from a hardware standpoint, the Apple phones have always just been beautiful, and I've always admired that. If it was running Android, I'd take it, hands down. Hands down. But I did an episode on hands-on photography when the latest iPhone was announced. It's the 14, right?
Yep.
When it was announced, and I had to do it because I'm sick of the marketing speak. And Apple, they're not the only ones doing it. Samsung does it. Google did it.
Yep.
And that 48 megapixel stuff, I could just see people running to the stores because they heard that, and it's just running. And I'm like, hold up, stop. Don't fall for it. Let me show you what's really happening. And it's called quad Bayer filters on the image sensor that's doing all of this magic. I'm not going to get into that here because it's way too geeky and technical, but it's just a bunch of engineering that's in place to help make things better than what it really is capable of doing. It's great. It's a great engineering feat, but it's still not getting you exactly what you think you're paying for.
Yeah.
So don't fall for the 48 megapixel stuff.
Yeah. Well,
and another thing, those campaigns I remember Google, when the Pixel 4 came out, they had Annie Leibovitz as a spokesperson endorsing it, and she did a whole presentation about it and all of this, and I love her as a photographer. She takes some great work, even though I have some beef with another image she did recently, but that's not part of this story. Yeah. But she was basically saying this camera is great. And when they were showing her trying to do a demo of shooting some model or what have you on the set, they were just sort of really quick cuts of her snapping the photographs. But if you paused the video, you would notice several things there. She would have a case on the phone. Not just any case. This was a case that had some handles on the sides of it. Why? Because a photographer knows you need to be steady with your shot, with your hands.
Yep.
Get steady. So that's one advantage that she's already added to this brilliant phone, quote unquote, already. And then there's another thing that was in that video. If you paused it, there were several lights.
Oh.
Several studio grade lights right there. And at the very beginning of our conversation, Miss Susie, what did I say? Light's going to make or break the photograph.
Right. Hey, right. Rhymes with light.
But that was Google just sort of like a bit of sleight of hand, if you will. It's like, hey, this camera's going to give you all these gazillion megapixels, but and even Annie Leibovitz loves to shoot with this thing. There's just this whole sleight of hand marketing speak thing.
I don't remember which brand was a while back. This is years ago. For God's sake, time is just flying by me. I feel like I'm so old right now. But there was they were talking about how great their phone was for shooting video or photos or whatever, and it turns out they didn't use that phone to shoot the video and the photos or whatever it was. They were using, and it's like people caught on to it and they got hell for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Apple, they did the same. They did a similar tactic as what Google did with the Shot on iPhone campaign, but to Apple's credit, they later, the next model, I think it was the 12. Yeah, I think it was the 12. When they did that whole Shot on iPhone campaign, they slowed down and showed you those cinema studios with their rigging.
Yeah.
They had gimbals. They had lights. They had cages. They were professionals trying to get the most out of the limitations that comes with a 1/2-inch sensor, and they pulled it off. Why? Because they understood that they understood the exposure triangle.
Yeah, remember the
Period.
one about the snow?
Oh, right. Yeah.
It was like, well, dude, you're using a freaking Hollywood type director, a
Right.
cinematographer. It's like, can you please? We have plenty awesome filmmakers here who don't have that, and you could have used them, and it would have been a better sale.
Right.
Because it was like, well, yeah.
They're like, well, dang it. And I see those commercials. And I'm like, well, yeah, I expect those guys to make this thing look like a blockbuster.
It's like, hey, my Honda can beat the Formula One race. It's like, well, yeah. Well, who's driving it though?
I wish they would sell it more, and they're doing a lot better with it now.
Yeah,
they're selling it more as in, all right, anybody can pick this up and shoot this. Just hold still, hit the button, and it's going to look great, and it does.
Yeah.
It does. They're better about that now. Other than the whole megapixel thing, that's what threw me off. I'm like, no, then you ruined it.
Well, it's like stabilization, like the gimbals and things like that. Well, it's like way back with the 4S, I was sitting at Starbucks and I put it in, when the slow-mo came out.
Yep.
And I was panning across the room, with the slow-mo on. I was like, ooh, who needs a gimbal or anything? I don't even think we had gimbals yet at the time. But it was like such a smooth thing. And I was like, well, if you use slow motion to shoot it and then you speed it up a little bit when you're editing it, it's still going to look a lot smoother. You know what I mean? And so I learned that trick. And when people do slow motion and a gimbal, I think it's like a little bit of an overkill.
Yeah. It gets a little mushy.
Yeah, it's like, come on, guys. And I'm not a big fan of gimbals. I got a gimbal and I used it twice when I got it. And I don't care for it because it's such a pain. It just flops around on me all the time when I least want it to. It's like you're not behaving.
I have 3. I have 3 here, and I use one seldomly, but I haven't used the smartphone ones in a while because again, I can hold my elbows to my side.
That's the thing.
I understand.
Yep.
Just stabilize and give yourself a nice wide base when you're standing. You're more than likely you're going to be okay.
I have basically the most simple stabilizer that is basically a piece of plastic that looks like a gun handle with the attachment to put the phone on. That's really all it is. I mean, it could have been my shoe.
Yeah.
And I know how to pan. I use it when I'm at Comic-Con for all the videos that I make. 90% of it, except for that one time when I got that gimbal, which I used it a little bit, and then I was like, oh, I'm so sick of this thing. But everything else, I use it handheld. And a lot of people don't realize that, for one, when you're doing montage videos, you don't shoot long 5-minute clips.
Nope.
And when you're shooting scenes, right? When you're shooting scenes, you're cutting them so tight anyways to show different perspectives. So you really don't need gimbals. I bet you right now there are 16 people listening to this and they're like barking. What are you talking about? No. Sorry.
I got gimbals here, and like I said, I seldomly use them. The one that I will use, I use it for. I will use it when I'm shooting product photography B-roll. Yeah. Because I have a stationary object and I can clearly do a pan automatically. Just hit a couple of settings and boom, it does it. Yeah. It's a smooth pan.
See, I love doing the handheld B-roll stuff. Because I was called the B-roll queen.
Yeah. But again, I seldomly use it because even still, I have another dedicated tripod that'll do just that with the fluid head tripod and just. Oh,
that's the thing. I have a $2,000 tripod, and I barely get to use it. And when I do it now, it's like with the little with my iPhone on top of it. You know what I mean?
I love that.
Looks like that like the Men in Black, the one with the big shoulders and the tiny little head on top. That's what
I'm not judging you because I've done that too.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, but it's the fluid head when I go to look at tripods, right, like prosumer, consumer ones, and there are all these expensive ones, and people are like, oh, well, that one's more expensive. That should be good. And I'm like, oh, no. You got to look at the fluid head, and how well that works, And of course, you want the legs not to be super skinny to, you want it to stay.
Yep, you want the support.
But without a fluid head, other than that, you might as well just put it on a table.
Just slide it yourself.
Yeah. So, all right, now tell people really quick. No, well, not super quick, but
sorry, I spoke too long.
No, you didn't. I mean, hey, it's about, it is what it is. Pixels versus, because I was going to segue into this and I got carried away. Pixels versus resolution.
Yeah, resolution is the measurement of the output of your image or your video, and it's commonly spoken more so about in video side of things because you have HD resolution, you have 4K resolution, which really isn't 4K. It's usually Ultra HD. 4K is actually a little bit bigger, and it's called 4K DCI. That's neither here nor there. But we can start with HD resolution, which is 1920 by 1080 pixels, wide and long. Pixels on the sensor is a whole different ball of wax. You're going to have 20 megapixels on your sensor that's just capturing the light, but it's outputting 1920 by 1080. So it's going to be really, really pretty because you have really big pixels capturing a frame that's essentially going to equate to just a little bit smaller than the frame. So it's going to be a lot clearer and just super duper clarity from a light standpoint on it.
Because when you take a photo with an iPhone, no matter how much light or whatever, the pixels most of the time are 72.
Oh, yeah. Pixels per inch. DPI, I'm sorry, not pixels per inch. DPI, dots per inch.
Dots per inch.
Yeah. And that's when you're dealing with printing, more so than anything. If you can get higher than 72 PPI, DPI, the print's going to look better, but it's not horrible at 72.
No, because then, like what I do with my photos, I use them, for marketing, right?
Yeah.
And so I bring them in. I use Affinity.
Yep.
I love you guys. So I use that. And so I bring it in and I raise the resolution on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then when I export them, they look good on the screen. They look really nice and clear, but it's not like megabytes huge. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's
upscaling.
Yeah. And I know that for a lot of, I think it was like on the Apple for the podcast, or they're like, don't upscale your, I'm like, don't tell me what to do. I want these things to look good. You know what I'm saying? But you don't want to overload it because, websites and things like that takes forever. Right. So those are things to consider. But now for print, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, for print, it's a different ballgame because it's going to give it just a little bit more definition.
Yeah.
When you have a higher DPI output there.
Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about one last thing. This is my favorite subject, storytelling in photographs. When you take photos, do you think story? What is the story behind this photograph? Or do you just have one in mind that brought you to even take the photo?
Most of the time it's what is the story behind this? If I'm out and about doing landscape, it's a little more difficult to tell stories in landscape. You're going to need a lot of help.
Yeah.
You're going to need some help with the actual land itself, or the clouds, or potential birds going by. So it's not as much there. But if I'm out and about doing street photography, when there's people involved, people are going to always tell a story one way or another without saying a word.
Right.
You know? And the only reason the camera goes up in front of my face to frame the shot is because I see a story right at the moment. And it may not be something that the person is intentionally trying to tell. You know, I could interpret it my own way, which is fun because if I happen to share that image with the world, most people will interpret it something totally differently from what I saw. And that's fun, you know.
I just feel like most people connect with stories.
Yep.
And so even if there's no story, you know, from your perspective, you're just shooting it. Yeah, like you could literally close your eyes and go click, click, click at different places or whatever in a scene, and then you show those photos to people, and people somehow they have to. It's the human part of us, right? That they
human
have
connection.
to. They connect to it somehow through some sort of story, and when you go, well, what do you see in that? They describe some sort of a story.
I agree 100%.
100.
And street photography is a lot of fun to shoot.
Oh gosh.
You know, a lot of people, they get weirded out nowadays because of quote unquote privacy. So some people won't go out and shoot because they're scared they're going to get fussed at, heck, some people think they're going to get sued and things like that. I've heard that. And that's not right. It shouldn't be that way.
Not out in public anyways.
No, that's something I try to tell folks. If you're in public space, you can shoot. You may not be able to capitalize off of it, like go make money from it. But if it's a public space, you have every right to grab your camera and take a photograph. The only from a legal perspective is exploiting children. There's that too.
Right.
You know, and even and I have changed the way I shoot street photography.
Yeah.
Because of some of the privacy concerns, even though I know my rights. But when it comes to children, you will hardly ever see an image of a child from me. And if the child is
identifiable at least.
Right.
Yeah.
If a child is in it, usually their head is turned.
Yeah.
There's one on my website with the child's face showing, and I did get permission for that.
Yep.
But that's the only one.
Yeah. Well, remember in the old days, like probably 10 years ago, when you would go to, I still ask permission a lot of times, you know, when I go to a small store, you know, like a small business store. Yeah. Hey, do you mind if I take a photo of this?
Right.
You know, because back in the day, they didn't want you to.
Nope.
Because they were thinking that you were shopping and you were going to go over there and say, "Oh, they got this on sale here. Go beat it by 2 pennies or something."
Sure.
It's just that, but a lot of stores now have gotten better. But asking permission is a great way, you know, to interact with people where you can they feel more comfortable when you're shooting the photo, and then it comes out better.
And the thing is, it's even easier now if you're asking this and you're using your phone.
Well, that's all I use anymore.
You know, if you use your phone and you're doing street photography, it's going to be a blast. It's going to be so much fun because people are diffused by seeing that as a camera versus me walking up there with the 70 to 200 millimeter lens on.
Completely.
You know?
Yeah.
Now, granted, because I do both. I shoot with my Pixel as well as with my Canon. And my practice for both instances is I tend to just make eye contact. And that tends to diffuse it. And what's funny is, in my experience, a lot of times they'll either give me a nod or they'll wink.
Yeah.
You know, because it's basically saying, "Yep, I see you." And it also helps the fact that my habit is I'm usually wearing really, really bright colors when I'm out shooting because I want to be visible.
Yeah.
and they see me and I see them, and they'll nod or they'll wink or something like that, and they'll smile or do whatever. And every now and then they'll even pose.
Oh, totally. I mean, yeah, I love doing this.
The situation is diffused, so they'll just pose. So just grab your phone and just have fun with it, and then say, hey, how can I send this to you? I'm gonna process them and what have you, but how can I send this to you? And that's just building more trust within the community.
That's more awesome, yeah.
When
I shoot video, as soon as you have a tripod, it's about the tripod. It could be a phone. As soon as you have a tripod, it's, what are you shooting?
Here come the police.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's like, are you kidding me?
Need a permit.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not but that is, to them, that's the obstruction, having to use this tripod. But if you don't use a tripod, you can get away with a lot.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've had many a run-in with the police officers, and it's been funny because there's only been a handful that were like total jackasses about it.
Yeah.
But most of the time they're like, we know you're just creating art, but you do have to have a permit if you're going to use a tripod. So if you would like to just use these stack of bricks that I see over here in the corner, you can use that. They've literally said stuff like that to me.
That's cool. Yeah, usually just stopping people. Like there was this dog that was tie-dyed on the street. And he had
in San Diego?
Yes.
No, never in San Diego.
Oh, man, people are so friendly here. And I literally walk around with a smile on my face all the time. Even my dog here at home looks at me like, hey, Miss Happy. Smiling back. I just have a smile on my face. And so it's very, friendly, to people. And, with that dog, I remember, and it wasn't even the owner. It was like a dog walker.
Yeah.
And she says, I'm like, oh, my God. And she kept walking with the dog. And then I go, oh, my God, that is the most awesome thing. And I'm laughing because it's so amusing to me. And I'm like, do you mind? Can I take a photo? And she sat there for 5 minutes trying to get the dog to sit and pose for me. I took like 7 photos. So she really worked the dog, she wanted it to come out good.
The dog's like, look, all I want to do is go out and walk. Really?
Yeah.
What is happening
I
here?
think I shot I don't know how many photos of the dog, but you only need one.
Yeah.
You only need one, and one will come out looking pretty cool. So, So storytelling with photographs, it's really not as hard as people think it would be.
No, it's not. And I've told people, and this is only if you can spare the time.
Yeah.
With street photography, again, it's easy to get stories because there's people involved. But a tip that I have is if you can do it if you're in a not necessarily in a rural area, go to like a town.
Yeah.
Okay, go to a town. It doesn't have to be a big city. Just go to a town where people working. If you can go out at rush hour and get there, actually go before rush hour and get to the areas where people are working before they're starting work, shoot then. And then come back when they're getting off of work and shoot then. Mm-hmm. Find different little spots around the working area, and you're going to get stories because there's people coming into work and they're either going to be frantic and running late or just in a great mood, or they're just angry like, dadgummit, it's Monday, and it's going to come through on your camera. You're going to see it.
Yeah.
Without saying a word. And then at the end of the day, you're going to see people that are just, oh my gosh, just a big sigh of relief as they're walking out the doors, or just angry because it was the worst day ever and they really hate their boss, just a lot of different personalities and stories that's just going to come from body language and not one word said.
Those are my favorite kinds of photos where people don't realize, they're not posing in front.
Right.
And it's hard to do that with a phone as compared to a DSLR with a zoom lens. You know what I'm saying?
Not anymore.
Well, I know, but they don't come out as good.
No.
The
but
digital
again,
zoom.
Light.
Yes, but the
Get
digital
the light.
zoom is not as friendly. You know what I
No,
mean?
it's not. No, that's more
real.
mumbo jumbo that they sell people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zoom with your feet.
Exactly. And so now it's easier because so if someone is sitting down on a park bench and they're deep in thought and you're walking by and you've got your phone out and you can take that profile shot of them or whatever, they're not reacting to it as opposed to a big camera.
That's correct.
You're
And
not
you don't
interrupting them, which
Right.
is rude.
And you don't have to get close. Yes, you have a smartphone. You don't have an optical zoom,
Right.
like a lens, but you can still capture a good shot 20 feet away.
Yes. And if there's good light, you can crop it.
Yep. See?
See?
Light rules.
I think we gave everybody a really pretty good understanding of smartphone photography, like hands-on, literally. How can you get more hands-on than what's always in your hand?
Good point.
Yeah, right. I think you should do a separate category for smartphone in your show. You do such a wonderful job with that. I hope everybody that's listening subscribes and make sure that they go there. You do this once a week at least.
Yeah. Every Thursday.
That's
Thursday,
right.
an episode goes up.
So
and,
you just did one today.
I really do appreciate people. Yep. One just came out today. And yes, I do talk about smartphones. I do talk about it's just general photography. I tend to tell people I don't give a crap what camera you got.
Yeah.
just come on over here. Let's talk about this.
You made my day when you retweeted that photo of the ducks at the park by the lake. And you were like, "Look at this." And you retweeted this, and I was like, "Oh my God." I felt like $1 million.
That's right. I remember now. I'm trying to go through my head because, boy, my Twitter stream is, it's great. Yeah. It's great, but it's always busy, so I have to filter through.
That's why it made such an impact of me. It's like, wow, I actually noticed this in a big. It's always, that's also the other part of the story in the photo, the subjectiveness of it, where you think, well, this came out nice, and then you post it there. And then, and a lot of people, I know Instagram, but Twitter is also a great place for photos. And I
most
post
people
them.
will tell you now Twitter is the place to go for photos because Instagram is sort of
Well, I still get them.
Down.
I still see a lot of photos on my timeline on my Instagram, but I also do like a lot of stuff. Like if I'm following people, I just like their stuff. I'm like that booster. I'm your booster. So if you're not following us on Instagram,
the signal
you
booster.
you want the red hearts. I'm giving them away for free. Anything that just makes me smile. It's not hard to make me smile. I'm telling you, I'm smiling all day long, every day. I've been smiling the entire time that we've been doing this.
That's awesome.
When I die, people will go, "Look, she's still smiling." I better not be shown. I think this is great. I think I'm smiling also because this is so good for everybody, so informational. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you really got something out of it, go ahead and tag Ant and me and share that, because we're paying attention.
Yeah. Please do so.
Yeah.
On Twitter or Instagram. I'm Ant_Pruitt on either one.
Awesome.
I know you didn't ask that. I just totally plugged.
No, I always, no, you're not. I actually, usually in this podcast, anyone who's coming back, knows that I ask people to do it. Why? Because a lot of people listen to these podcasts while they're doing things like doing their laundry or driving their car or jogging or whatever. And the world does not revolve around our podcast. They're not going to stop everything and go click on the link in the notes or go do all that stuff. So hearing it is a great way for people to remember it, especially, say it again, something simple like Ant
Pruitt.
Ant, any last words? Because you're going to be a judge this year for our mobile short films and for the photo contest.
My last words are, hey, you got a camera. Get up and go shoot. Go capture some images. Go capture some video. Just stop thinking about it and just go do it. And you don't even have to share whatever it is you captured. Just get the reps in, folks. That's all you got to do.
That was beautiful. Now say goodbye to our listeners.
Goodbye, fine listeners.